Hey everyone, this is Darius from the Shotcaller, and I'm sitting here with Vedius. How do you feel?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Pretty good myself. Now, we've seen some very interesting matches today. We just finished the Vitality vs G2 series. How surprising was it that G2 completely ruffle stomped that one?
I mean, it was a little surprising that they stomped, but it's not too surprising that they won. I think Vitality drafted pretty badly. Initially, I could see the idea behind, okay, draft winning lanes, look to try and snowball through the early game. It's something they've done many times. But then I was like, actually, G2 have a lot of globals. You can't force plays at level 6 because you're going to get a Galio ult on your face. You're going to get a Gangplank ult. So I think G2 had a good game plan. They stuck to the game plan. They executed very well. And I expect this kind of G2 to be showing up much more throughout the regular season.
Can we expect the G2 area to continue and them being a hot contender for
That's a big question. I think right now they look definitely like, based on today's performance especially, and they're like 5-0 right now over their last 5 games. I think that they are top contenders, but I really want to know how the Schalke versus Fnatic game goes, because those two teams are also teams that I'm looking at being like, they could also fight for the throne. So we have a very competitive split in Europe. It's a lot of fun.
Speaking of that, if Schalke does win this series, we're going to have a gigantic middle-of-the-pack group, even bigger than before, essentially.
Yep. Tiebreakers, boys.
Yeah, just tiebreakers all day long. How did it result in such a gigantic middle-of-the-pack situation? Because everyone expected Fnatic to just stomp, given that they barely changed any of their roster. Vitality came out of nowhere. Giants is also surprisingly good. Rocket putting up a fight.
So one of the big things is best of ones. Teams are newly formed, right? Which basically means that a lot of them aren't able to consistently do things that they do one week that they did in previous weeks. And now we're starting to find consistency in a lot of teams. So Fnatic, G2 are 2 very good examples of teams that showed a lot of weakness in the first few weeks, have now been able to improve, and have very quickly been able to sort out some of their issues. So some of the other middle-of-the-pack teams are starting to find their form, and I think Schalke is one of them that's also getting much better very quickly. But at the very early part of the split, you basically have this combination of teams are good at some things, not very good at others. Teams are good at punishing some things and not good at punishing others, and they only get one opportunity to put all of that into practice. So that's why we kind of got this mishmash all over the shop. Some teams got luckier than others too. But at the same time, I don't think that the best of 3 would necessarily clear up our standings much more. But I do think that now you'll see much more consistency from a lot of the teams. And the teams that should be at the top will make their way to the top. And those that had a good start will slowly start to sort of fall down towards the bottom.
So what are those teams that should be expected to go to the top and to the bottom?
Giants is going to go down, 100%.
Okay.
I was a big fan of Giants initially. I think they played really well around some of their carries like Ruin, and I've been really impressed with what Targamas has been able to do especially. But at the same time, the biggest issue with Giants is they get early game leads. They have a terrible mid game where they make really bad decisions. They get caught, and then they have to play towards late game. And if you get an early lead over them, they're actually really bad at starting fights. So I believe there's so much so that last week and the week before, I went through every single one of their fights, and the ones that they started, they lost. They only ever won fights when the enemy team initiated onto them. And that is not something that you can rely on, right? So Giants as a team, I think, will fall down. G2, Vitality, Fnatic, Schalke, and Splice, I believe, are our top 4. And then the number 6 spot, I was kind of expecting Unicorns of Love to get better, especially given that they seem to be playing much better recently, especially for a team that's like 1-8 now. Yeah. But they don't seem to be clicking as well as I would hope, and they seem to be making a lot of weird decisions. So I'm a little upset. I was expecting a little more from them, but right now I think that it is Rocket fighting for that 6th place spot, and now I'm trying to remember some of the other teams that we have. So you have down the bottom, Rocket, Giants, Unicorns, H2K, and there's one that I'm forgetting that I really shouldn't.
Have you mentioned Misfits before?
Misfits, Misfits will be our top seed. But that just goes to show how poorly Misfits are performing right now.
All of a sudden, after a really good 2-week performance.
Yeah, which is super weird for me, because I even made the statement that I think Misfits was the best team in the league. And
after those 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I was pretty confident, because I was like, their only weakness right now is the fact that their mid laner sucks during the laning phase, right?
Yeah.
And even that you can mitigate and you can play around, and maybe he just needs a little more time to adjust to his role. Maybe they just need to find better champions to put him on. There are plenty of ways to fix that, and I thought their shot calling was great, their ability to play around Baron. I think they had the best Baron setup in the league. And then just last week, I don't know if it was just Max Law or if it was a team thing or communication just broke down, but they weren't playing their game plan at all. It didn't feel like the normal Misfits. And today we saw a better performance, but I guess I just still have my doubts about Misfits right now. So right now they're not in my top 4, but I definitely see them as a potential playoff contender.
So, okay. Yeah, describe it. All good. We just had a little intruder. Well, let's talk a bit about your own personal career, because you've mentioned this on Twitter as well. You've essentially made the jump to being almost a fan favorite all of a sudden, with at least being rather popular, whereas the last year has been a bit difficult, you mentioned, when it comes to criticism on Twitter, on Reddit and stuff. People consistently being very highly critical of you and your role, and you have somehow managed to vastly improve that.
So I think it's always difficult for new casters coming onto the scene, largely because new and change is something that fans will often struggle with. And I get it, and it's just something that time will fix, and you just kind of have to prove that you do not hurt their viewing experience. And what I've come to learn is that a lot of good League of Legends games carry themselves, and all a commentator is there for is to follow along with the action and to enhance the experience, not really to take away from it. So especially at games at Worlds, I try to avoid ever interjecting my personality. I try to avoid throwing out outlandish statements. I made a couple of dumb things, I definitely know that, but for the most part, I just try to go along with the game and get excited when a fan would get excited, and be critical when a fan would be critical, because at the end of the day, a caster's role should be to not distract the viewer from what is a great game. The responsibility on the caster comes when you have really slow games. Like H2K over the last few weeks has not been the most exciting team to watch. Today they were much better, but it is an inevitability that they were pretty slow. They didn't do a huge amount. And same for really long, drawn-out Splice games. And that's when the responsibility falls on the caster to be a little bit more entertaining. And that's why so many people love Quickshot and Deficio, because their synergy is great, they have great banter, they're very witty, and in those long, drawn-out games, you really get to see their natural personality shine. Now, the issue for me is one of my strengths is awkward, kind of cringy humor. Picks to Watch is a perfect example of things where I don't really care what people think of me, and I'm willing to just go out there and do weird stuff.
And wear weird things.
And wear weird things, exactly, right? So I don't really have that, but with regards to casting, I understand that it can be very distracting and off-putting to some people. And while I tried to do it a lot when I initially joined, this year especially, I try to avoid putting any of that kind of cringy stuff into my cast, because I recognize that it can be very distracting for some people. And while there are people that enjoy it, and that's great, I have to cater to the majority. And I feel that if it distracts at least half, which it has a high probability of doing, then it's just not valuable. So I try to keep my kind of humor like game related. Last week we had a funny conversation about how minions spawned, and I also made a couple of RuneScape references, like a throwback, and that stuff is kind of less cringy and more just kind of like, oh, that's funny nostalgia. Oh, that's kind of a funny thing to talk about. So I think that shift has come in and it's being more recognized, but also I've just invested heavily into trying to keep up this idea that EU is a very analytical region. And I've worked very closely with Deficio specifically, who's helped me understand his methods on how he approaches the game and how he understands the game. I've better built relationships with a lot of the pros, and it's really helped me just take my understanding of the game to a new level. And I would like to give a special shout out to George in the event that he does watch this, because he is a former Fnatic analyst, current Team Liquid analyst. He very kindly spends a lot of time explaining a lot of concepts to me and helping me take my knowledge to the next level. So hopefully that comes across on cast. Anyway, that's part of the goal, because he is a big helper of that. But that's where I'd like to think a lot of the perception has shifted. Obviously, it's not perfect yet. People still love to compare me to Deficio, which is always going to happen. And I admit, in terms of entertainment value, he definitely smashes me. But hopefully, come time, with a little bit more experience, people will come to enjoy me just as much as they do Mr. Martin Lunger.
And of course, that's only natural. We see Loch getting compared to Shox. I always, under every Reddit thread, under every YouTube video, I get the comment of being EU Travis.
There you go.
So that's just the nature of being new.
Indeed.
And yeah. Speaking of synergy, though, I think you have a very special synergy with one specific caster, and that is Medic. Right. On a scale of 1 to 10, how highly would you rate that synergy?
So I think we have a lot of natural synergy because, number one, we're both British. We understand a lot of the weird references that we both make. Number two, we have very similar humor. Those people that might think my humor is kind of cringy, like, he actually really finds that funny. He really likes that. And also, we live together now. So
right, yep.
we're actually roommates, and we spend a lot of time with each other, and we actually just know each other pretty well. So it's very easy to bounce back and forth of each other just because of the sheer amount of time that we spend together. We duo queue a lot. I tried playing AD because he's a support main. Terrible idea. Never doing it again. Mid is the only place I belong. But yeah, I think that it's something that we've had just because circumstance. It was never really intended synergy. It's just kind of naturally there due to fortunate circumstances.
Which is the best kind of synergy.
I suppose so, yeah.
So is there anything you would like to say to the plenty of EULCS fans that have been tuning in more and more at this point?
Please keep sending me your feedback. I love hearing that I am doing Fiddlestick cosplays really well. Love hearing that, really constructive. But in all seriousness, please do keep reaching out and let us know about what you think of the EU broadcast and the shifts and what you enjoy and dislike about the casting. But also thank you very much to all the people that say they enjoy my casting and supporters. Tune into the EU LCS. We're extremely competitive right now. Playoffs is going to be super hype. The regular season keeps getting better. I don't know if you know this, but we have a former SKT player in our league. He's actually plays top lane. If you don't know him, you should check us out because SKT, former world champs, ever since he left, they've been going downhill and they're on the upswing.
The clear correlation curve is
exactly. So you're definitely going to want to check out Europe if you don't already. And thank you again.
Okay, hopefully we'll have less PC breaks over the upcoming weeks.
Yes.
Other than that, this was Vedius. Thank you very much for your time. This was Darius from the Shotcaller, not EU Travis this time. Hope you had a good day. See ya then.